what we're looking at here is this is a very simple scene, nothing overly exciting. Basically what we're trying to do is simulate a room, and you can see here there's a conveyor belt as well. And what we want to do is basically create a particle emitter that's going to basically emit meshes, which is kind of a cool feature that you can use. So what we want to do is create a new emitter to start off. So we'll just go to our particles, MUT, and open it up, and we'll create a new particle system, and I'll just create a grouping called particles and emitter 3 because it's a demo 3, and hit OK. Now at this point we get something, our default shows up. Now what we need to do is we highlight the particle emitter, and we do type data, and we change that to mesh data. And at this point we don't see anything because you'll see there's no meshes. So we're going to go and we're going to grab a pre-existing mesh. Getting the lighting a little tricky on custom. You can have some glitches. So we're just going to use a pre-made one. It works fine and it's just easy to show. So we're just going to grab this object here and hit OK. And at this point the emitter is actually working, but the items are so big that we don't see them. So if you actually cycle through and change the color, you'll see that yes, sure indeed, we have this emitter that's generating stuff. It's just we were actually inside of it, and it looks like we're upside down as well. So now we need to basically start adjusting the settings on this. So if we go into required and we look at this, we go down. The first thing we want to do is we don't want to use max draw count. We basically want to spawn based on time. So right now it's spawning at a constant, and what we want to do is change that to 0.5, and now every 2 seconds it's basically going to spawn an item. Now you can see lifetime isn't that long. We don't need any varied items because they're just going to go across the conveyor belt. And if we do something like 15, that should be enough to get them all the ways across the belt. The initial size, this is way too big, that's why we had to zoom out. So if we open this up and go back to constant, just make it a 1 by 1 by 1 size. Now it's going to be small, but at least when we zoom in you can see it's manageable. Final thing is the initial velocity that's going up at this point. We don't want it to go up, and we don't want to vary it at all, so we'll just do a constant, and all we want to do is we want to do 100 velocity on X, and what that does is it basically creates the illusion that the particles are moving in that direction, which is pretty cool. So those are all the basics. So now we'll come in and we'll add the emitter. So I'll go back to particles, and I'll just drag this into my scene. And first thing I want to do, if you don't see anything, is you want to make sure you turn your real-time icon on. And I'm going to take this emitter and move it over to the right, and move it up, and rotate it 90 degrees, up 90 degrees. Let me get that clean. Do it clean, we're going to have some problems. There we go. Okay, so now you can see that they're going straight, and they're going in that particular direction. So the other thing we want to do is if we look at this scene, you can see it's a little too high, so we'll just move the emitter down and basically want to line it up with the top of the conveyor belt. And now if we look in this scene, you'll see that they're moving, but you'll also see that it's black and you're not seeing anything. So if I go back and I go cycle through and change the views, you can see it's black, and that's because the mesh, lighting of the mesh isn't enabled. So if we click in the blank area, this is unusual, but just make sure you click in the blank area, you turn V light equals true, now the mesh is actually lit. Now because of some of the settings, you're not going to see this real time in this demo. There's static lights and a couple other issues. But the good thing to be aware of and just know is what you see in the preview is actually what you're going to get in the end. So we'll update our thumbnail, and we'll close this out. And then at this point, we could actually do just a quick build. At this point, play from here. You can see we actually have the particles, and they're illuminating, and they're working just fine. Sometimes it's a little buggy and it might not show up. You just have to go back and make sure you get all the steps right. and make sure that you have that be lit option that I showed you in Cascade. That's pretty important. Now, the one thing we notice at this point is the belt isn't moving at all. So let's go and modify that as well. Now there's a pre-made texture that we have for the belt, conveyor belt material, and if I double click that, I open up right now, it's not doing anything. There's a, let's see, coordinates. There's a, if we hook this up, now right now this isn't doing anything, but if we say we want to do a 0.75 speed, and it's going to load it up, you can see it's actually moving the UV map of the texture, so this is a seamless texture that'll continually moving in that spot. And once we hit save, you should see it real time. Yep, there we go, taking place. So we save that out, and then we're all done, and we have our basic, let's go back and look at one last time. We have our basic conveyor belt with the objects, with the belt moving, and the objects, which should be coming shortly, being spawned. Okay, so our next one is, let's go to 4. 4 is kind of a fun one. It's basically using a what's called a beam emitter. And if we look at this space just real quick, let me just do a build so you can look at it. Rather simple scene. Play from here. Look around, and you'll see that there's a little control panel, and there's these pedestals, and up on the ceiling there's this basically center point. We're going to create basically lightning bolts that go from the center point down to each of these towers. And that's what we'll be focusing on. So we'll go back to Chapter 10, Particles folder, and we'll create a new particle system. And this one will be called Emitter 4. Okay. And then with this one, we want to do a couple things. We want to change it so type data to beam data, and that will instantly see we get this very different looking item. Now we want to change the material so we actually have something that looks like lightning. So let's just go into our textures real quick and find the lightning material, and right click and create a new material from that. That's fine. Double click to open up the material editor, and you can see we have the texture sample that came in, and we're going to continue doing the same thing we've done before. We're going to add the new vertex color, 2 multiply modifiers. Multiply, and let's just do it one more time. Multiply, this one's going to go to emissive because we want the lightning bolt to be illuminated. And then this one down here is going to go to opacity. And then we want to take the actual texture and the vertex color values. So we're going to take the texture RGB values and the vertex, which we're not going to animate at all, but so it's there. You can actually change the color. So if you want a different color lightning bolt, you can get it that way through the cascade like we did earlier. And if you look, now we got the lightning bolt, and then we want to change this just to additive, and to make life easier, do unlit. And now we basically have our basic textures. So save that out. Close this. We got that material, and basically we can go into this emitter and hit required and switch out. And now we have the lightning bolt, and you can see now with the beam it's doing some weird little dancing thing. And it's going to take us a couple steps to actually get this to look proper, but that's okay. That's just how the beam emitter works. It takes a little bit of time to get it to look proper. So what we need to do is we changed the material, we added the new beam data, and we need to add source module, which is basically where lightning bolt starts, and then multiple targets. So if I go and right click, you see beam source, and all of a sudden the instant I do that, you can see that all of a sudden we're getting this streaky thing that's taking place. Now the default source value right now is constant, is at 50-50-50, which is relative at this point to the emitter. We want to make it absolute, so that's in the scene it'll be a coordinate 50-50-50. And we actually want to change that because we want it up in the middle of the ceiling, and I already have these values, so 0, 0, and 752. And when we do that, what I'll do, now we got to zoom out to actually see this at this point. But what I'll do is I'll take it from the top of the ceiling, where that light is that we talked about. That's 00752 right there, for the emitter. And then the next thing we need is we need the target, which is where we want the beam to go. And once again, this is set up. We want to make this absolute, and we want to make the values for this 340 by 340 by 0, which is on top of one of the pedestals. So that's where that's going to go. And once again, the preview and those types of things, you can see this really small thing way up. Now, in order to start to see this and get it more, we're going to go into beam data, and we're going to change the sheets, which is basically how many textures. Imagine that you rotate around on the center to create a cylinder with a single shape, and we're going to increase that to 6. And what that is going to do is it's going to increase the visual intensity of the emitter, how we have it. You can see this little microscopic thing here. So we got that moving. The other thing we want to do is we also want to increase the speed. Right now the speed is basically 10, and we want to increase this to 100,000, which is going to cause it to streak. And now all of a sudden you can see we get it going all the ways down the way we want it to. And then the other thing we can do is we can do the count. And if we increase that to 3, then what that'll do is that'll increase the number that can be there, so it'll get brighter and less. So we can change that, and then go into lifetime. And right now these are lasting a second, and let's set this so it's lasting a tenth. So now you can see we're starting to get a strobe effect that's going on, which is kind of what we want. And the initial size module, where's the initial size? Let's play around with this so there's a little bit more varied in the width. We'll increase this to 100 by 100 by 100, and now you see we have a lot more realism to the bolt. And as I mentioned earlier, if you go into color over life, you can come in and change this, and if we did the value right now, if I change this to 0 and 0, you can see now it's starting to get red. So you can actually go in once you get that vertex color. Basically we're changing the vertex color value there. So now we have one emitter that's in the scene that's going from this point to this point, and we actually have 4 columns. So what we do is we can write, and we can do particle system emitter, and we want to duplicate emitter, and we want to duplicate it again, and we want to duplicate it one more time. And each one of these we want a different target. So this is 340. We'll make this negative. Now we got 2. We'll do the next one, and we'll set this to be negative, and then let's go get the final one. So over here, target, and set that to both of these values to be negative and negative. And now we have that all done. So that's all set up. So we can close out, open up, just make a save on these, file save. We can update our preview as well. And now the nice thing is you can bring in the particle, and because all the values are absolute, we shouldn't have to do any movement or relocation of anything. So particle emitter 4, that's the one we just did, and we add it, and you see the instant I add it to the scene, all of a sudden now we've got that strobe going. We don't need to, it's not changing lighting at all, so we can just do a play from here and look, and now we have our beam emitter shooting up from the different posts. And obviously you can add more particle effects for sparks and sounds, and you can use Kismet to animate the lights and get a lot of variety going with that. The final demo I'm going to show you is a different type of emitter, and it's basically based on the velocity of the object. It's called a ribbon emitter. So we're going to create a new ribbon emitter. So we'll go to new particle system, emitter number 5, and we have the same thing. Now we'll do similar data, type data. We'll change this to ribbon data, and you can see the instant we do that, we get this weird kind of streaky shape. And what we want to do is we want to attach this to this cube if we watch the animation, let me just build this real quick. This is very simple. It's merely just basically a cube inside a room, and as you can see, it moves around the space. And depending on how fast and which direction, we'll see it creates a different type of trail that's left behind, so it looks almost like an exhaust or something. So if we bring emitter 5 into the scene, and then I'm going to have to go in multiple views, and we take the emitter and we bring it over to the cube on the right side, and then we also look at it in this view and get it all hooked up. So now it's basically attached to the side. Now in order to attach something, if we go into F4, there's an option for attachment and base, and this is actor 1, which is so let me double check. Is it 0 or is it 1? Yeah, it's 0. Okay, so now at this point, if we play this in the scene, play from here, and if we look, the emitter is actually going along for the ride. Now at this point we're not necessarily seeing it because it's staying at the point, but we know that if we start to move things around, let's just make sure we got this right. Yeah, base, intervector, 0. Yep, okay, so that's right. So we'll see it when we actually go to animate. Okay, so that's all we're going to do there. We want to create a texture for this, so this should become familiar at this point, what we're doing. We're going to grab this soft flare material, and we're going to do, where is creating material? There it is. Okay, so we got soft flare 2. Open that up. Do the same thing again. Grab this, pull it over, right click, constant, vertex color. Bring that one over here, add 2 multiplies, multiply, and one more multiply. One up there. And now we're going to go texture sample A, vertex color to B, set that up to emissive once again because you want this to kind of glow. Additive we'll also do unlit. So, and then we'll take the alpha off of that, the alpha off of this, run those into opacity, and now we have basically our simple shape, and save that. We're going to replace the default material of the particle emitter. I think I got it open right here. Go into required, and there's default material, and switch it out and replace it with the trail. And now you can see we're starting to get something that looks slightly different. And will work a little bit better. You can see it's almost looking kind of a little bit like an exhaust or something like that. So at this point we want to change different items. So if we go down, further down than required, right now the max draw count, which is how many particles exist, is at 500. If we increase that to 5,000, that should increase the density of the different particles and get them to look a little bit more realistic. The other thing to do is to basically delete the initial velocity module, which is going to make everything look like it disappears. If I undo that and I put it back, the one thing I can show you is what we're going to do with the color, which is color over life. The in value at the very beginning I'm going to set to 0.95 and 0.75 and 0. And if I do that, you can see now I've made the vertex color yellow, so I've tinted it out. And now I'm going to go down and I'm going to change the value midway, which is 0.5. And at this point, I'm going to change the material to red. So now you can see it's going up to red, so we kind of get this orange blend. And then if I wanted it to go to smoke or something at the end, I could add another point and at the end make it actually go to white if I wanted to. And it's already going to fade out, so that's not much of an issue. So like I said, we want to get rid of that module, and then at this point there's no velocity, so you're not going to see everything. So just be aware of that. And then we want to go in and make sure that we go over content browser. Okay, content browser, save the whole thing just to make sure everything's right. Build the scene one more time, just make sure that's all good, and then go and play from here. And if we look up and wait till it goes by, we have, you can see this little trail that follows the box. And obviously you can do a lot more with it, but that's just kind of an idea that people use for jets and vehicles and different types of things. So that concludes this week's lectures on particles.